Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Hari Om. Namaste and welcome everyone to this week's Satsangha. Just to let everyone know, unfortunately, I was feeling under the weather this afternoon and early into the evening, and as a result, I almost canceled this live stream. And in fact, I am sure that some people began to spread the word around that the live stream for this evening was canceled. About an hour ago or so, I decided that I did not want to cancel it, and I wanted to do it anyway. However, I am going to be doing things a little bit differently. I am not going to be giving the scheduled talk that was announced for this Satsangha live stream, but rather instead, we're going to just do straightforward questions and answers. And I want to see if anyone out there has any questions for me. Don't ask them yet. I'll let you know when is the time, because again, as always, if you ask them too soon, I won't see them. But I just also want to just to request from people out there that if you know others who attend regularly, and if you can please contact them and let them know that the live stream is indeed going on. And again, the fault is mine and mine alone. I, again, was really not feeling well earlier in the day, and I did tell someone that I was going to be canceling it. But then again, just a short time ago, less than an hour ago, I decided that I was going to do the live stream regardless, because this live stream helps too many people for me to cancel it for any reason whatsoever. So again, I thank you all for being here. And at this point, let me just say a few things that I usually say before we actually do a live stream. And they include the following. That is, first of all, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to this channel. You will see that if this is your first time here, you will see that the information, the knowledge that we offer on this channel is unlike any knowledge that you will get on spirituality anywhere, on any channel, on any platform whatsoever. So please subscribe. Also, please like this video when you have a chance. When you also have a chance, please go to our primary website, which is dharmacentral.com. When you are there, you'll see that we have a wealth of information that is there on this ancient Vedic path, this path known as Sanatana Dharma. You will see that we have our books that are available, that we have an email list that you can please feel free to join. We also have information on donation and membership. If you would like to become a member of the ISDS, that is the very best way that you can help us, actually, is by indeed becoming a monthly tithing member of the ISDS. And again, just to repeat this, for anyone out there who you know others who regularly attend the live stream, I would appreciate it greatly if you could please contact them and let them know that indeed it was not canceled. I, again, originally was going to cancel, but then I decided not to. So if you can please contact anyone you know, let them know that indeed the live stream is on, it is happening. But I will not be giving a talk. Instead, maybe I will do the talk I was going to do tonight. Maybe I'll do it next week. But for tonight, I would like to just have this be all questions and answers, questions and answers, questions and answers. So with that, again, I apologize tremendously for the confusion. And with that, let me signal that if you would like to ask any pertinent philosophical questions about the path of Sanatana Dharma, then again, it would be my pleasure to answer those questions. So please feel free to begin asking any questions that you have. And with that, I will give a few moments for everything to catch up. There is something like at least a 20-second delay or so. I believe YouTube just naturally does that. So it will be a short time, I'm sure, before I even see the first question. But as soon as I begin to see some questions, it will be my pleasure to answer them. First question, thoughts on Islam? Respectfully, no, not on YouTube. Very good. Wonderful to see everyone, wonderful to hear from everyone. Here is a question from Sri Ram, and it is, Namaste Acharyaji, is it fine to do meditation without sitting in lotus pose? Thank you. Well, yes. I mean, in fact, let me answer that question extremely accurately, given how you asked the question. Padmasana. Padmasana is lotus pose. So if you're asking quite literally, is it possible to do meditation without being in full lotus pose? Then the answer is yes. Yes, it certainly is possible. One does not have to be in full lotus pose in order to do meditation. That is actual Padmasana, because there are indeed variations. There's Ardha Padmasana, half lotus, Sukha Padmasana, which is easy lotus pose. Sukha means easy, easy, pleasant, etc. There are several ways in which one can sit. However, in doing meditation proper, what is of importance is that if you can, you do want to sit as close to the ground as possible. That doesn't mean you can't use a cushion. It's perfectly fine to use a cushion, to use something under you, anything that's comfortable, a blanket, a towel, a pillow, anything like that. These days, I will sometimes use a cushion. It really depends on where I am, etc. But you do indeed want to be sitting properly. That's the important thing. It's not necessarily important in this day and age to be in full lotus pose, because for many people, it's not only difficult, it's impossible due to knee problems, etc. Indeed, when I meditate, I used to do full Padmasana, but these days I do Ardha Padmasana. People may have seen, even when I'm giving lectures, I tend to sit in Ardha or half lotus pose, Ardha Padmasana. And I can sit like that for a long period of time, but I don't do full lotus pose anymore. So again, the important thing is that you sit in something approximating a lotus pose, that you sit close to the ground, that you have your back straight, you have your back erect, which as a yogi, even now, I always have my back straight. I'm not actually, I'm never leaning on the back of the seat. It may look like I am, but no, this is me leaning on the back of the seat. I actually am very, very straight back, even as I'm lecturing, even in just daily life, even as I'm eating. So that's important. You want to do that. You want to breathe properly, etc. And those are the important things as far as posture. Now, all that being said, the nature of Harinama, the nature of the name of God, is such that the name of God is infinitely merciful and gracious upon us. So what this means is, while there are ideal ways in which one should position oneself when one is doing meditation proper as a sadhana. So like I said, sitting either on or as close to the ground as possible, etc., etc. The nature of the name of God is such that there is benefit regardless of how we say it. So thus, I've said to people many times that if you're driving a car, you can be reciting the names of God within or even out loud. If you're cooking, if you're walking, if you're taking a walk in nature, etc., you can be saying the names of God either out loud, in your mind, however is best for you given your stage of sadhana development. So the truth is, there's no bar, let's say. There's no regulation against saying the name of God. But of course, again, in meditation proper, there is the ideal. And that is what I explained a little bit earlier. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Very good. Stormageddon Dark, Lord of all, asks this question. Jaya Shri Guru are Saraswati and Gayatri, that is the personification of the Gayatri mantra, the same goddess, and can we add Brahma to our altars to honor him in puja? Very nice. Good questions. Two separate questions here. First of all, Saraswati and Gayatri Ma, Gayatri Devi, are indeed the same person, two aspects of the same person. We should say, actually, Gayatri Devi is an aspect of Saraswati. Indeed, there are many aspects of Saraswati, too many to go into. Indeed, in my book, The Shakti Principle, I mention this, I talk about this. I have an entire chapter actually where I talk about Saraswati and I talk about many of the different aspects of Saraswati. Gayatri is indeed, Gayatri Devi, I should say, is indeed one of the aspects of Saraswati. Indeed, really she's non-different, but Saraswati expanded into a very specific form for a very specific purpose. And that is to be the essential personification of the Gayatri mantra, and not just the Gayatri mantra, but Gayatri itself, the power, the Shakti of Gayatri, etc. So indeed, you can see them as two separate goddesses, and indeed they are depicted differently. They look a little bit differently if you see depictions of them, but they are in actuality the same person. So indeed, that's the first thing that you ask. And then you ask, can we add Brahma? And I assume that you mean the creator demigod Brahma to our altars to honor him in puja. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. People who are conversant with the Vedic tradition know that in this day and age, we do not worship Brahma at all. This is why people have taken note of this without really understanding why. People have asked about this, have seen this phenomenon in which, indeed, all the gods and goddesses are honored, worshipped, etc. But for some reason, again, in the minds of others, I know the reason, but for some reason, people will think to themselves, for some reason, I never see Brahma being worshipped. I never hear of temples to Brahma. I never hear of murtis to Brahma, etc. And people will notice this without really understanding why. Well, it is indeed the case that we should not worship Brahma. This is why, for example, it's been said, not that Sanatana Dharma is that interlinked with India per se, but certainly that is where you have the most Vedic temples today. In all of India, there is, I believe, and we're talking about a place with at least hundreds of thousands of Vedic temples. There is one temple to Brahma, only one, and very few people go there. This is why you don't really find murtis. You'll find depictions of Brahma, certainly, in paintings, images, etc. In ancient times, you'll find depictions of Brahma as far as statuary, but not as far as murti, as far as objects that are used for iconic worship. You will not find that anywhere. And yes, indeed, we do not worship Brahma. And as far as the reason why, it's very, very complicated. Let me just say this for individuals who truly are conversant with religion, both quote-unquote East and West, which are two terms I can't stand because I don't really make that distinction. Truth is truth. Brahma currently is the demiurge. Brahma is the demiurge. And it is for that reason that we do not worship Brahma. So no, I would not at no point add him to your altar. We respect him, we offer our respect to him as the creator, but we do not worship Brahma. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Chris Kramer asks, Namaste Acharyaji, does one's svadharma include more than one's career path, such as daily duty and obligation? Very good question. Yes, indeed, it does. Indeed, by one's svadharma, one's career path is only one aspect of one's swadharma, because what is meant by one's swadharma is one's inner essence. That is what is meant by that term. Sva means one's own, and dharma, we could say, is the essential attribute of any given thing, anything, any person, any object, etc. So thus the cosmos itself has its own svadharma that we call dharma. That is the general dharma as natural law, you see. Natural law is the essential attribute of the cosmos itself. But in the same way, we all have our own dharma, our own essential nature, essential attribute. And that being the case, our own swadharma is reflective of many different things. It's reflective very much of the inner person, and of let's say this matrix of various aspects that make us who we are, including our will, our desires, our karma, our likes and dislikes, our environmental experience, and etc., etc. All these things coming together. These things make us who we are, and as a result, as an individual, we have our own essential nature. So that being the case, certainly it applies to our career. Indeed, if we know our own essential nature, in other words, if we know ourselves well, we're going to have a very easy time choosing a career and doing well in that chosen career. But more than that, yes, it has to do with our daily life. It has to do with our likes and dislikes. It has to do with understanding why we are the way that we are as an individual. You know, why we react to certain things the way that we do, why we have certain likes and dislikes, etc., etc. So yes, it has a lot more to do with just one's career path. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. How do we deal with boredom and a feeling of loneliness? I know I answered this exact question not long ago in a live stream, so I apologize. I'm not going to answer it again. I answered pretty much this exact question. I forget if you were the same person who asked it. But maybe 1, 2, at the most 3 live streams ago, I answered this exact question. So please refer to that, because the answer will remain the same. Please give me a moment as I look through these questions. Very good. Here's a very practical question. This is from Stephen Murray. Is the epidemic of anxiety and depression in the modern world due to a lack of real spirituality, a spiritually sick environment making people unwell? Important question, and on the one hand, the answer obviously is yes. Certainly this is indeed the case as far as why we have, as you very correctly stated, an epidemic of anxiety and depression. Ultimately, of course, the answer is spiritual. Ultimately, of course, the reason why there is indeed so much depression, anxiety, stress, meaninglessness, yes, depression, sadness, anger, all of these things in the modern world, in modernity, is indeed because we have lost sight of the sacred. That is the foundation of the answer to your question, is that ultimately, yes, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting. I was having a very nice conversation with one individual just yesterday where we were Skyping, and I was going somewhat in depth into this, into the history of let's say, more sacred ages versus now our secular age in which we've been living for the last several hundred years, at least since, let's say, the so-called Enlightenment era. So, you know, roughly the 1600s, 1700s, etc. In the past, at one time, if you looked at traditional societies, and this included almost every society we can think of, from all across the length and breadth of Europe, but especially those societies that were more dharmic in nature. So, you know, of course, Vedic society several hundred years ago, again, before modernity. If you looked at Southeast Asia, Buddhist society and / Vedic society, etc., etc. Also, if you looked at even many traditional tribes and peoples like this, what you saw was that, again, before the commencing of modernity, when people had spirituality in the center of all things, it's not that things were perfect, but people were happier, period. It's not a debate. You'll have some skeptics, oh, well, people have always been miserable. Well, there have always been many things, you could say. There's always been X thing. But some things sometimes during some eras are better and sometimes worse. And whether they're better or for worse, there are reasons why. And indeed, when the sacred was seen as being more in the center of individual life, community life, etc., culture, it was the case that people had more contentedness. It was the case that people were more peaceful, more happy, etc. And now, with the commencing of modernity, beginning several hundred years ago, and again, all of these traditional societies, from very, very advanced civilizations to even smaller tribes, now that the sense of the sacred has been stolen from them, people are miserable, people are depressed. So indeed, this is the case. Now, I have to answer this question with a little bit of nuance, because on the one hand, while what you're asking, this is indeed the case, that yes, spirituality, because spirituality is no longer in the center of people's awareness, now there's depression, anxiety, etc. But we also have to keep in mind that this current state in which we find ourselves, a state in which atheism, not just atheism, materialism, not just materialism, but truly an asuric, a demonic mindset is now what is ruling over our world and has been for quite some time. We need to keep in mind that this didn't just happen by accident. You know, too many people, and unfortunately evil people, always are eager to convince good people that evil things just kind of happen by accident. You see, it's in their interest for us to think that. No, the truth of the matter is the reason why radical atheism, radical materialism, demonic mindset, etc., the reason why these things have become so prevalent in our society is indeed by design. It's because there have always been an elite number of individuals who have ruled over society, not perfectly, you know. People always ask, oh, this idea, this conspiracy theory of there being a small elite of people who control the planet. Oh, how do they control every single human being? They don't have to. They're a tiny number of people who are extremely smart, and all they've ever had to do was control the major institutions. That's it. So indeed, these people decided a long time ago that religion had to be exterminated, eradicated from society. This has been their program for hundreds of years. They've done it very slowly, in a Fabianistic sort of way, for those individuals who understand what that term means. Very slowly, so that people barely noticed. And those few people who were intelligent enough to notice would be ridiculed. So in this way, yes, our society has purposefully been made worse and worse and worse by this elite cabal of atheistic, materialistic, demonic individuals. So as far as, again, getting back to your question, anxiety and depression in the modern world, is it due to a lack of real spirituality? Yes. But at the same time, we need to also get to the root of why. Why is there a lack of spirituality today? It's not that people, the common person in the street, it's not that they got tired of spirituality. Spirituality was stolen from them. And this is why people are in anxiety. This is why people are depressed. This is why so many people feel that their lives are meaningless and they are angry. Either angry or depressed or both. So indeed, we need to reverse all the above of what I just stated. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Very good. Here is an interesting question from A. Shakti. Can Vaishnavas also include crystals in their spiritual practice? Some people Some people, I assume this says, some people use them in meditation, healing chakras, etc. Let me answer this in this way. Personally, I have nothing against such things as crystals. Crystals are very beautiful. Indeed, some of them can indeed have a very good power to them, etc., etc. But I need to just humbly correct a term that you use here. Can one use them in spiritual practice? See, spirituality, in the deepest sense of that term, involves exclusively that which is of the nature of consciousness, and that meaning Atman and Paramatman. That means ourselves as eternal beings, and God, and everything indeed that is purely of the nature of consciousness, purely of the nature of the truly spiritual, meaning the transcendent. Now, what often happens is that sadly people have this confusion between, let's say, interesting, subtle phenomena that occur on a subtler level, a level that is more subtle than the physical, but then they confuse that with the overtly spiritual, not understanding that many of these things fall in between, actually. There are really three primary modes of reality. There is the empirical, the physical world that we see around us. There is, and there are several words we can use, the sukshma, the astral realm, the energetic realm, which is subtler and higher than the empirical, but it's not spiritual. It's not purely of the nature of consciousness. This is where psychic phenomena occurs. This is where ghosts are. This is the dream state. This is indeed where chakras and kundalini and other such phenomena have their place. This is in a realm that's halfway in between the physical and the purely spiritual, that realm of pure consciousness. So thus, all these various phenomena that you're describing here, there have certainly always been spiritual individuals who have used such things, who open their chakras, who indeed do things with crystals, etc., just like there have always been spiritual beings who have to take a bath, you see, getting down again to the physical. However, it's important to not confuse these three things, these three states. The physical versus the astral versus, again, the truly spiritual, the realm of consciousness. So this is what I would say. There is certainly nothing wrong with Vaishnavas, individuals who truly want to embrace full spirituality. There is absolutely nothing wrong with them also, again, having an interest in the things that you mentioned, just like there's nothing wrong with purely spiritual people, again, having to eat, having to take care of their physical body. But it's important to not confuse these different things. So again, that would be my answer, that if you find yourself attracted to these things for a sattvic reason, for a good reason, for a reason that will do good, that will bring health, that will help you to advance, truly advance and grow as a person, nothing wrong with them. But do not approach these in a New Age way. Throw out every New Age concept, book, etc. that you've ever read, because unfortunately, they will be mixed with a touch of truth, but also a lot of garbage. And again, you use these various phenomena for the right reason. But ultimately, have it be your goal to know the highest, to know that which is the supreme consciousness, which is God, which is Sriman Narayana. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Here is a two-part question I see from Frankie Mosa, so I'll read both parts. There are lottery winners that go bankrupt, and a lot of people who had terrible hardships that propelled them to great heights. It seems karma is the hardest to understand because you can't even tell if something happening is ultimately good or bad. Yes, that's a very good insight, actually, and that actually is indeed quite true. And this is why karma is not the only thing that is operative in a person's life that serves as an explanation for what they are doing, what they are experiencing, either good or bad, etc. Rather, there are many different factors that are here. And as you say, it's very true. There are people who, they seem to have good karma, they'll win a lottery, but then that will pretty much destroy them as a person. You know, they will end up wasting all the money and damaging wonderful relationships that they had beforehand, etc., and they end up bankrupt. You do indeed hear stories about this all the time. And then, of course, the opposite, as you say, people who had truly terrible hardships, challenges in life, but then they end up indeed having a wonderful life almost as a result of that. So indeed, this is why to try to understand karma in a black and white sort of way that, as so many, again, New Age people and people who are not very deep will try to understand it, I just stubbed my toe. Oh, that must be because I did X an hour before then. And, in a very simplistic way like this is not how karma operates. And indeed, karma is not the only factor that's operative in our lives to explain happiness and suffering. It's one of the things. There's also free will. There's also the environment that we're in. There's also the free will of others. There's also, if we are lucky enough, the grace of God. And on and on. So there are many different factors, not just either good or bad karma. So indeed, you're correct in what you say here. Very good. Very nice. Here's a question from, let's see, I'm sorry, give me one moment. Okay, actually it's a two-part question. Very good. So this is from Lothar Grimm. Good evening. If one is a follower of Sanatana Dharma, even if they are enlightened, can one experience intense fear and anxiety due to circumstances in life, feeling overwhelmed, etc.? And it looks like your second part is a different question. So let me deal with this one first. So you're asking, in Sanatana Dharma, can an enlightened being experience fear, anxiety, etc., due to circumstances in life, feeling overwhelmed, etc.? Very interesting question. There are indeed some things that even an enlightened being can indeed experience. In fact, it's funny. I was watching a very short documentary that was done on the life of Prabhupada. It's only like 20 minutes long. I can't think of the name of it, unfortunately, but maybe someone knows what it is, and maybe they can put the link in here. In fact, as I say that, excuse me, give me one moment. Let me not just keep you in suspense. Give me 1 second. I will try to find the actual name of this documentary on Prabhupada. So just give me 1 second, please. And here we go. All right. This is a very nice documentary. It's called The Empowered Acharya, short film, and it's put out by Hare Krishna Movement Mumbai. That is the name of the channel on YouTube. But point is, I was watching this the other day, and I'm a tremendous fan of Prabhupada. And even though I knew that this was the case, this was not new news to me. It was interesting hearing yet again Prabhupada speaking about this in his own voice. Now, Prabhupada was an enlightened being. Prabhupada was a pure devotee. Prabhupada was a Shaktavesha avatar. Prabhupada was incomparable as far as a spiritual teacher. And yet, when he himself was recounting his own life, and again, you hear this in this documentary, when he was recounting this about his own life, he had many ups and downs, not so much personally, but in his teaching mission, to the point where he spent several decades in India before he came to the West with failure after failure after failure. And even when he came to America, at one point, he had his things stolen. This was before he even could establish his movement. He had a studio apartment, like one room he was living in, and he had all his most important things, his tape recorder and other things like that that were important for his work, stolen. And as you're hearing Prabhupada speak about this, he says that, as a result of this, I was depressed. As a result of this, I was very aggrieved. I was very sad, etc., etc. And again, I had heard this before. There's nothing about Prabhupada that I don't know. But it was an interesting reminder hearing this again in this documentary where you hear him saying this in his own voice. that indeed, even if a person is an enlightened being, very specifically for the things that are of true importance, they have feelings, not trivial things, not trivial things. It's not that, oh, he was sad because he lost his favorite pair of pants, or something like, he didn't wear pants, so that's what makes it funny, or something like that. No, he would experience indeed very sad emotions when his mission was not being fulfilled. And indeed, I've always spoken about this, how even an enlightened being, and we have hundreds of examples throughout the Vedic scriptures. This idea that the enlightened being becomes an emotionless robot, that's Hollywood. That's New Age. That is not something found in the Vedic scriptures. Indeed, a person who is an enlightened being, they have control over their emotions. They understand their emotions. Their emotions, again, are focused on the most important things in life, not trivial things, but they have emotion. They have emotion, indeed. They can feel sad, indeed. They can feel angry. There were times when Prabhupada once in a while would display a temper. But why? Because he was slighted? No, because the truth was slighted. You see, that's the difference. So indeed, an enlightened being can indeed experience such states. However, I need to make a very important comment here, not fear. An enlightened being does not experience fear. An enlightened being does not experience fear. They are in a state of abhaya. Indeed, Prabhupada's name was Abhaya, Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. That was his full name, Abhaya, no fear. And indeed, an enlightened being does not experience fear, but can they experience depression, a little bit of anger, sadness, etc.? For the truly important things in life, yes, they can. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they've never read the Vedic scriptures in any way whatsoever, and they've never seen the hundreds of depictions of rishis and sages who indeed experience and display such emotion. Such a person does not know what they're talking about. If they tell you, no, an enlightened being has no emotion, that's an idiot. Don't listen to them. Again, read the Vedic scriptures. You will see such people. Prabhupada was an example of this. Very good. Very good. Mr. Oldenswolf, I'm going to get back to your question in a second. I just first want to answer part 2 of Lothar Grimm's question, and this is really a separate question. Can so-called mental illness make one incapable of fully following Sanatana Dharma or becoming enlightened? Absolutely. If it really is a debilitating mental illness, meaning something that is clinically observed, something that the person indeed has zero control over. And I'm glad you said so-called mental illness, because, that's the term that's used today, mental illness. But really what's meant by this, what is meant by a mental illness, and this is something that really, to do justice, I should answer in a very long answer, but I just don't want to take that much time to do so. Let me just say that just like the body can be debilitated, of course the mind can be debilitated. Of course. The mind can indeed be debilitated. As far as calling this a mental illness, well, I wouldn't necessarily use that term, rather debilitation, but in the same way that the body for the most part can be healed, not always. In the same way, even mental illnesses can be healed. However, the idea of a mentally, let's say, ill person, again, just to use that term, because that's the common term, coming to the point of enlightenment as a mentally ill person, that would not be possible. That would not be possible for the same reason as if one were to ask, can a demonic person become enlightened? As a demonic person? No, of course not. Because then that person would not have the necessary prerequisites to then do what is necessary to be enlightened or to even desire enlightenment. It's kind of like asking, can a person without limbs become a basketball player? And, games aside, pretending aside. Oh, yes, let's take a person without without limbs, and let's pretend he's playing basketball. No, a real basketball player on a professional basketball team, throwing the basketball, running around, etc. No, it's not possible. So for a mentally ill person, quite literally, to come to the point of enlightenment, that is not possible. However, can a mentally ill person heal themselves in such a way that now they can indeed begin to work toward enlightenment? Absolutely. Absolutely. A mentally ill person can indeed heal themselves. In some cases, sooner rather than later. In some cases, it would take a longer period of time, depending on the person. But yes, you would first have to heal yourself from this mental illness before you could then do what is necessary to become an enlightened being. Very good. Very nice. And Mr. Oldenswolf, Namaste Acharyaji. Thank you for all you do. Does the ISDS use a particular Tlock? And if so, what are the particulars? And let me tell you the answer. Let me tell you why it is the answer. The answer is not really. I'm not wearing Tlock today, but when I do, you'll see that it's similar to what Prabhupada wore. You know, very simple. And that's why I wear my Tlock in that way. So very simple on the bridge of the nose and then straight up in 2 lines up the forehead. Very, very simple. And this is what I prefer, because that is indeed how my primary guru, Bhakti Dakshaka Sridhar Swami, that's how he wore his Tlock. That's how Prabhupada wore his Tlock. But then also, when it comes to the realm of Tlock, and this is maybe going a little bit too deep, I actually have a book that depicts this, many images of Tlock. It's actually a very rare book on Vedic spirituality, maybe from the 30s or 20s or something like that. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ways to wear Tlock. There are dozens of designs, etc. And I will be honest with you, this is what I have determined. One way of wearing Tlock versus another way of wearing Tlock is ultimately meaningless because they're all sectarian derived and caste derived. Quite literally, again, in this book that I have that depicts dozens and dozens of ways of wearing Tlock, it will literally say, hey, Vaishya wears this kind of Tlock, and etc., etc. And what is ultimately lost is what was the original idea, that the reason why we wear Tlock is because Narayana wears Tlock, number one, and number two, we are wearing Tlock to indicate that we are servants of Narayana, of Krishna. As far as all these sectarian terms, that let's say a Kerala Madhvaite Brahmin will wear this kind of Tlock, that is meaningless. It gets to the point where the concept of Tlock has devolved to the point where, of course, again, involving what? Involving corruption. Involving that the Tlock now represents caste and sect. What kind of Vaishnava are you? What sect? What region of India do you come from? This is meaningless. We are devotees of Vishnu, and we wear Tlock in order to show that. And that's why, again, I simply wear Tlock the way that my guru did, in a very simple way, to simply indicate that I'm Vaishnava, devotee of Vishnu. So I hope that answers the question. Very nice. Here's a question from Brittney. And it is Namaste Acharyaji. We are so happy to see you today. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. I do not regret being here. I don't regret the decision to be here. And indeed, I'm actually I feel absolutely wonderful being here. As you can probably tell, I'm actually very, very happy to be here. Could you please explain the spiritual significance of fasting, especially on holy days? Do we please Krishna by fasting on Janmashtami? Very good question. First of all, this is indeed kind of a universal phenomenon in spirituality itself. So indeed, you find this certainly throughout the Vedic tradition. You find this in Buddhism. You find this in Christianity even, where people will fast on certain days, on during a day celebrating a specific saint that they feel very attached to, etc. So this is something that's universal. Now, from the Vedic perspective, very specifically, The reason why we fast is severalfold. First of all, if you're a healthy person, to fast to begin with is actually quite a good thing to do. Not to extremes, but to fast one day, let's say, on nothing but water, is actually a quite healthy thing to do. I actually did a lot of research on fasting many decades ago when I was much younger, so I know about fasting quite a bit. It's actually a very healthy thing to do. The other thing is that it is a tapasya, that is, it is an austerity that you are doing to show your dedication to God. Now, this is what's interesting. I just said to show your dedication to God, to show your dedication to serving God. Now, you're not showing that dedication literally to God, you're showing it to yourself. When you're fasting, what you're doing is you're showing yourself that, yes, this is how dedicated I must be to God, to the point where I will deny myself a pleasure in order to take that time that I would have ordinarily used to cook food, to eat food, etc., and instead use that time today on this sacred day to focus all of my awareness on God. So indeed, this is one of the reasons why. It's also a sense of, I'm sorry, the word just slipped my mind, unfortunately. But in any case, I think you're getting the idea. The idea is that we are showing our dedication to God. It's something that helps us. It also helps us in meditation as well. That when you are fasting, and again, doing it the correct way, not to extremes, it clears your mind, it clears your body in such a way that now when you say mantras, now when you are meditating, etc., you do so with a crisper, clearer mind, etc. So yes, there are many, many reasons why. As far as pleasing Krishna, we hope that everything positive that we do will please Krishna. So certainly we're hoping that all of our positive efforts will please Krishna. Ultimately, this is what we want, is indeed to please Krishna. Indeed, if we were to state, interestingly, if we were to state what is indeed the absolute meaning of life, in the simplest of ways, the absolute meaning of life is to do everything in such a way that we please Krishna, that we please God. So indeed, yes, fasting as well. Very good. Very good. Here's a question from Jasmine Knight. Who are the twice born? I have been reading Srimad Bhagavatam and have noticed this mentioned quite a bit. Yes, indeed. The actual Sanskrit term is dvija. Dvi meaning two, ja meaning to be born. So dvija, those who are twice born. For those Christians out there who have snuck in here because you want to get a higher taste of God from us, no, it's not referring to being a born-again Christian in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. Though honestly, I have nothing nothing against that concept as it was originally taught in the Gospels. The idea that indeed, when one goes from being a more normative, materialistic person to then becoming someone who is devoted to God, it is in a way as if you have been born yet again. Yes, I would agree with that, but that is not what dvija, in this sense, twice born means. Rather, what it's referring to are those individuals in the higher three varnas, that is brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, who have undergone what is called upanaya initiation, the upanaya ritual or ceremony in which you are now invested with a sacred threat. At that point, one is considered to be dvija, or twice born, because now you have the ability to study the Vedas properly under the tutelage of a guru. So that's what the term dvija means. One of these three higher varnas of individuals who has undergone this specific ceremony, upavita ceremony, where you are now possessed of the sacred threat. That's what a twice born person is, and not just Srimad Bhagavatam, but in the Vedic tradition. Hope that answers the question. Very good. Here's a very nice question from the way. Acharyaji, when an Atman moves on to the spiritual world, does the intellect cease to be for that particular Atman? It is difficult to envision existence without thinking. Thank you. Yes, indeed. That's a very good question. And it is indeed difficult to envision existence without thinking. And the reason why is because, yes, that's not a possibility. So let me explain this conclusively, as I explain everything about Vedic spirituality. When we speak about intellect, there are two forms of intellect. Indeed, interestingly, there are several variant Sanskrit words and terms that are used, but interestingly, this one term is used for both of these strands of intellect, both of these types of intellect, and that is buddhi. Buddhi means both intellect in the material sense, material intellect, meaning that factor by which we think factually. That factor, that mental factor, that substance, that subtle intellectual substance by which we think factually. That's the thinking process, materially speaking. That's the first, let's say, the first way in which the term buddhi is used. But then there is a secondary way in which the word buddhi is used, and that is intellect. Not so much even intellect. In this case, it is translated as wisdom faculty in a much higher spiritual sense as a natural faculty of Atman itself. So buddhi as wisdom faculty is something that is eternal, and that is again an eternal function of the Atman. So thus, upon liberation, indeed, we do indeed lose material intellect. That is very limited intellect that is used solely for factual knowledge alone. But we not only retain, but we now have full access to and full empowerment of buddhi in this higher sense of wisdom faculty. Indeed, this is why there is, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, an entire yoga that Lord Krishna speaks of called buddhi yoga. Because the idea of this yoga is indeed to cultivate this eternal wisdom faculty. Now, again, there are many distinctions between lower versus higher, let's say, thinking, for lack of a better word. With lower thinking takes place within the context of illusion. Lower thinking, again, tends to be factually oriented. Lower thinking is a type of thinking that is radically flawed in so many ways and is dependent. It's conditional. It's dependent upon upon exterior factors as well as upon the amount of data that we have within the mind substance, within manas, within mind. That's lower intellect. With this higher thinking, this wisdom faculty, on the other hand, again, it is of the nature of the eternal, both as an inherent faculty of Atman, but also even functionally. It is something that only deals with that knowledge that is of the nature of the eternal, i.e. wisdom, what we would call wisdom. So thus, the Atman thinks, but the Atman thinks in a way that is in concert with eternality. But trust me, you still think, if anything, you think infinitely more perfectly once you are liberated as an Atman. So I hope that answers that question. That was a small nutshell. I could have gone much deeper. Very good. I see Erica Jones is here. Wonderful. Namaste, y'all. Namaste to you as well. Very good. And let me see, please, if there are any other good questions. Give me one moment to read this question, just to make sure that what he is saying is accurate. Very good. So Rick Vartigiam asks a question here, and let me just answer by saying this. Correct. And let us go on. Very good. And please forgive me at this point because we only have 4 minutes left. If I skipped your question, it's not necessarily, it may have been because it was a bad question, but probably not. Most likely it was a good question, but again, I'm just looking at the time and I would like to try to end on time today, so I know I cannot answer all the questions, so I'm looking for questions that are especially very different, interesting, etc. Questions I think people will absolutely benefit from. So if I skipped your question, please don't take offense. It's only because we only have 4 minutes left, and that's less time than it seems. Very good. I've answered this many times, but I'll answer this again because it is a question that many people do ask, actually. And that's why I've answered it many times. And the question is from Inspirational Mindset. Jai Shri Guru, is the only goal of Sanatana Dharma to transcend karma? Also, what is the difference between karma and kama? And how can we transcend both of them? Very good. So first, to answer the first question, indeed, it is not the only goal. It's not even the primary goal, interestingly, in Sanatana Dharma to transcend karma. That actually is not the primary goal of Sanatana Dharma. The primary goal of Sanatana Dharma is not a negative, it's a positive. The primary goal of Sanatana Dharma is really twofold. It's Atma Jnana and Brahma Vidya. It is to have self-realization, to know our true selves, our true identity, our eternal identity, to fully embrace who we are and to live as that spiritual identity. You know, not just to know it, but as an object, but to live as consciousness. That's the first goal. Second goal is indeed to know God. And to know God fully, to know God in an unadulterated sort of way, God as the highest aspect of God, and devotionally, God as person, and to know that person intimately. That's the actual goal. And as far as transcending karma, we do that in order to achieve the two goals that I mentioned. So I hope that answers that question. But also you ask about the difference between karma and kama. Well, karma, we know what karma is. You know, this is, again, this the dharmic principle by which whenever we engage in any sort of action with ethical content, either good or bad, that necessarily we are creating our own future by creating a reaction, the fruits of which we must be present in the material world to then experience. That's karma. Kama means desire. Kama means desire. Sometimes it's translated as lust. That is not always the correct translation, actually. Kama is a complex word that, like with many Sanskrit terms, has several meanings. The primary meaning really is desire. And indeed, it is desire that for the most part causes us to do that which creates karma. You know, because we desire something, we desire to achieve something, to do something, but then again, when there's something of the nature of ethics that comes in, i.e., we perform an action to harm someone, to steal from someone, to do something negative, unethical, or the opposite. We choose to do something ethical. When we desire such a result, and then we engage in such activity, then there is karma. So that's the relationship between them. And how can we transcend the both of them? How we can transcend the both of them is by, rather than making our own ego, our own ahankara, our falsely constructed identity the center of our reality, we instead make God the center of our reality. That's simple. Now, as far as how that's done, that's everything that we talk about with every single live stream, that it has been written in every single one of my books that I've written, about 10 books now. That's something that's discussed in all the Vedic scriptures whatsoever. How we do that? Meditation, by practicing the full yoga system, by devotion toward God, by doing all these spiritual activities that are necessary to indeed purify ourselves from the taint of ahankara, of false ego. Very good. Please give me a moment. Again, I'm looking through so many questions. Oh, very good. Here is a good, very practical question that I'm glad somebody has finally asked. Actually, I'm very happy that someone has finally asked this, and that is Rex Philippus. And the question is, Jai Shri Guru, is there a line on what animals we may have as pets so that we do not hinder a lacto-vegetarian diet? Examples being dogs, cats, which are mainly carnivorous in diet, etc. Yes, that's a very good question, actually. And let me answer this with a little bit of depth. First of all, ideally, indeed, if one is to have pets, of course, yes, it is indeed best to have pets that are vegetarian themselves. The reason being that if you are a truly, very, very serious spiritual person, you want to avoid handling meat, you know, and it's only because meat is something tamasic, and we try our best to avoid anything that's tamasic, even handling it to give it to someone else. So it's something that you want to avoid. So this is why traditionally people in Vedic times would try to have quote unquote pets that were vegetarian. So for example, this is why cows were so popular. Cows are vegetarians, so people had cows not only for their milk, but very often they treated them very lovingly as pets. Sometimes even as semi members of the family. They treated them with great affection. Now, if one does indeed have a carnivorous pet, several things I want to say about this, because sadly I have seen again and again, I've read this, I've seen videos of this, I've seen so many instances, and it tends to be vegans, unfortunately, because unfortunately vegans are not very intelligent individuals. Actual vegetarians are a little smarter, so they would not attempt this. But I've seen many vegans will have a pet dog, a pet cat, and they will try to feed it a vegan diet. That's animal abuse. That is animal abuse, and I don't care about one story about, oh, I had a pet dog for 5 years and I gave them a vegan diet and they were just fine with it. No, it's fortunate for you that your dog couldn't talk. No, such animals are meant to eat meat, and there's nothing wrong with them eating meat. To try to make your animal who is carnivorous, a dog, a cat, into a vegetarian is animal abuse. They're meant to eat meat, and indeed, if you choose to have a dog or a cat, you better feed it meat, because that is what is its natural diet. And indeed, if you do not, then you are going against nature. As much as you may claim, oh, I'm an environmentalist, vegan, blah, 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 you're going against nature. A dog and a cat are meant to eat meat, so give them meat. But then again, you have to choose very wisely. Feeding meat, handling meat, even if you don't personally touch it yourself, opening the can, putting it, in the bowl, etc., is a tamasic act. It's not a tamasic act to the point where you're going to be spiritually crippled for doing such a thing. But of course, again, we try to avoid as many tamasic acts as we possibly can. So ultimately, you have to make your own choice as to whether you can afford to engage in such a tamasic act or not. So I don't tell people, don't have a cat, don't have a dog. No, that's perfectly up to the individual. But that would be the Vedic standard, what I just explained to you. Better to have a vegetarian animal. If you don't, that's your choice. It's fine. It's not something that's horrific having to feed them meat, but you need to make that choice yourself. And if you do have a carnivorous pet, give them meat. Don't try to force your cat to be vegan, please, because you are now anti-nature. And you're claiming you're an environmentalist vegan is now moot and meaningless. So that is the answer. Very good. Opinion on Jehovah's Witnesses. They are Abrahamists. Abrahamism is the opposite of Dharma in every way, shape, and form. Johnny Rusty says, all glories to the lotus feet of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Absolutely. Ki Jaya. I agree. Please give me a few moments, just looking through a few more questions here. Let me answer this question, because indeed, this is a question that I have not only thought about, but I have lectured on. Indeed, I've had discussions about this with some of the top Hindu leaders upon the face of the earth, actually. And this is Kevin Takar. Dharmic culture in India is being abandoned in favor of Asuric culture. Meat eating is becoming glorified, scriptures are ridiculed, traditions are forgotten. How can this be prevented? Yes, I have seen this for decades. I've seen this ever since I've been following Sanatana Dharma, and it's an ongoing process that has been occurring since before I was born. I don't know your age, but I would assume since before you were born. This is a process that has been going on for a very, very long time. Again, when earlier tonight I was talking about how modernity, and very specifically we call it modernity, it's a demonic world order, actually, that sees itself as being at war with God. We've seen that modernity has eradicated traditional ways of being, traditional cultures, and the spirituality that they have followed for time immemorial. This is true for India as well. And it's a very sad situation where, yes, I always have to warn people. Western New Age types, Western New Age types. I always have to warn them. They always have this idea that, oh, I want to be so spiritual, so I'm going to go to India and go to the land of yogis and become spiritual. And I always warn them. I say, well, wait a minute. I've been to India, and I was in India when it was a better India, actually. And I warn them, if you go to India expecting that the moment you get off the plane, everyone is a yogi, you're going to be very disappointed. Because sadly, India, again, like the rest of the world, has been a victim of this anti-spiritual program that has been implemented by demonic individuals for, again, a very, very long time. And indeed, India is in very bad shape spiritually. The fact that they now have a truly wonderful prime minister in the form of Narendra Modi has slowed down, I would hope, this process of rapid materialism a little bit. But the truth of the matter is, yes, India has been abandoning Vedic culture for quite a long time, many generations. Now, you ask, how can this be prevented? And let me just say, what I just said to you, for those who don't know, any religious Hindu, every Indian Hindu will agree with. I said nothing controversial, trust me. Again, I've had this discussion multiple times with Hindu leaders, some of the top Hindu leaders on earth, actually. So this is very common knowledge, what I just explained to you a moment ago. But now, how can this be prevented? The primary way that this can be prevented, and this has always been the message that indeed I give to people, that I have given to Hindu leaders, that I have given to Hindu parents, who themselves are religious, but they see their children have zero interest in Sanatana Dharma, etc. This is the answer that I give them, and it is the answer. The thing that is missing, more than anything, is the practice. And when I say practice, I'm talking about the sadhana, the practice of Sanatana Dharma and yoga on the part of the common everyday Hindu. So in other words, the common everyday Hindu, you can even look at someone who is a quote-unquote religious Hindu. But what does that mean? They'll maybe read Bhagavad Gita and go to a temple and do puja, but that's it. And they may do that religiously. They may read Bhagavad Gita every day, and they may increase their knowledge, their intellectual knowledge. They may go to a temple and do puja, which is important, but they are not doing sadhana. What is missing is sadhana, but more importantly, the reason why this is important is what is truly missing is the experience of God within. When Sanatana Dharma was strong, why was it strong? It was strong because there was a Vedic society in which, indeed, all around you, you wouldn't have to look far, and you would find sages who were experiencing God. And when you met them, you knew that. You felt it. There was that Shakti, that empowerment on the part of sages because they themselves did the sadhana that was necessary, i.e. meditation and yoga practice permeated with bhakti, such that they were now experiencing God and directly empowered by the divine. This is what is missing now. So thus you have so-called Hindu revival movements, but that are mainly political, that mainly just complain about other religions, complain about missionaries bothering our people, and on and on and on. And it gets tiresome hearing all these complaints and complaints and complaints all the time, without the understanding that Sanatana Dharma is not merely a religion of complaints. It's not merely that we define ourselves by our enemies, but rather we define ourselves positively by the fact that we are empowered by God. And that is what we're missing. This is what India is missing. What India needs is really what the world needs. Really what the world needs. And that is an army of sadhus. An army of individuals who themselves practice and practice perfectly and become individuals who are incorruptible, and who, when you meet these individuals, you are meeting individuals who themselves are empowered by God in such a way that they are invincible. And thus, Sanatana Dharma, by extension, is invincible. And thus, the Vedic community, the Hindu community, by extension, is invincible. This is what's missing. Not just the right political party in power. Oh, the BJP is in power now. That's good. That's a good thing. Please keep in mind. Again, I support Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is all very good. But the externals alone are not enough. You see, it's interesting. Narendra Modi, he is a very good Prime Minister. Probably the best Prime Minister India has had since independence. But why? Do you know why? Again, those of you in my audience who are Indian, do you know why he is such a good prime minister? No, not because of his Hindutva ideology, not because of anything else. Because every day he wakes up early in the morning and he does his meditation and he does yoga and he's vegetarian and he follows the principles of Dharma. In other words, because he does his sadhana. And it has transformed him spiritually. Well, we need an army of such individuals in India. We need an army of sadhus in India and in America and in the UK and in Austria and in Germany and in Australia and in New Zealand and in Canada and on and on and on and on. When this occurs, we will restore Dharma to our world. This is what's missing. Very good. So with that, just the very opposite, because man proposes, God disposes. Rather than ending early today, which I actually thought I was going to have to do, it's the opposite. We're ending quite late, but I thank you all for being here very, very much. I thank you all for your continued support. And I will be here again next Monday and the Monday after and the Monday after. And I It's my privilege to be here with you. It's my absolutely humble and joyful privilege to be here with you and to teach you in any way that I can. I ask you that you please, in every way that you can, continue to practice Sanatana Dharma, continue to learn about this path authentically, not from New Age frauds, not from silly individuals who claim that they're a Swami so-and-so or a Sadguru so-and-so, and in actuality, half of what they're saying, they're just making up. Rather, please continue to come to this channel and continue to learn about this Vedic tradition authentically. Continue to practice, more than anything, your sadhana. Practice this meditation. Om Namo Narayanaya. This is our primary mantra. Meditate on that mantra each and every day. Continue to read the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, Upanishads, Yoga Sutras, etc. And continue to help us, the International Sanatana Dharma Society, in every way that you can. We need your help if we're going to restore Dharma to this world. Become a member. Go to dharmacentral.com. Become a member of the ISDS and help us become a monthly tithing member. And in this way, you will help us to continue with all the activities that we are doing. And with that, I will end here now. And again, I thank you for being with us. Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Hri Om. And with that, everyone, I will see you next Monday. And I ask you between now and then to please take very, very good care of yourselves in every way.